And as we approach 21 years since the September 11th attacks, here's a live look at New York City's skyline. It's courtesy of EarthCam. In the center is One World Trade Center, where the Twin Towers once stood. But as the years go by, there are a growing number of Americans who have no personal memory of that day and where they were at, what was happening. The Pew Research Center finding that 93% of people 30 and over last year remember where they were on September 11th. Just over 40% of those aged 25 remember, because remember, they were only 5 years old at that time. So in a survey of secondary teachers in 2019, the majority taught about 9/11 and the War on Terror about once a month. About 15% never taught on the subject, many citing they just didn't get that far in their lesson plan, or they just didn't have enough time for adequate discussion. But are the lessons that are being taught really resonating with students? According to a study in the International Journal of Public Opinion Research, earlier events learned about indirectly cannot have the same emotional impact regardless of their objective significance. No, that's a lot to ingest right there. But panel, are we doing enough to help the younger generation truly never forget? Angela, I know you're in New York. I know you're a mom. So let's start with you.
For people in New York City and for people over 30, as you said, it's impossible to forget. You walk around New York City, you still see the memorials everywhere, on every fire truck, in front of police stations. It's just such a part of our fabric. But you're right, I am a mom. And frankly, for my children, the pandemic above all has really been what's affected them the most. And are we doing enough to remind them? I mean, it's up to the parents to decide. I think every generation is defined by their own trauma. And to some degree, I think the phobias that accompany those feelings of 9/11, it's not a bad thing for those to be slowly dissipating and allowing people to reintegrate.
I think it's really important that we continue to shine a light and make an effort to educate the next generation. I mean, I understand that the attack on Pearl Harbor, JFK's assassination, the assassination attempt on Ronald Reagan, those were all very seminal moments in American history, and people remember where they were when those instances happened. But for 9/11, I remember 9/11. I was in school when it happened. I can remember the day very vividly. And what it did for our country and how it unified us in a way that really has not been seen since. You know, everywhere sold out of American flags. Everywhere had American flags. We were all so proud to be patriots. I mean, everybody remembers George W. Bush's strike down the middle of the plate at Yankee Stadium in October of that year. I mean, there were seminal moments in American history based off 9/11 and what it meant for us as a culture and a country, and geopolitically as well. It's important we remember not only the lives lost, but the impact that is enduring to today because of it.
Brad, I think you are the youngest member of our panel. I don't want to make assumptions here. You know, were you taught about 9/11? Should 9/11 lesson plans be mandatory in schools?
I think I am. I'm actually a Gen Zer, so I'm only 24. I definitely don't remember 9/11. I was alive, but I was only a few years old. And I think for our generation, it's the kind of thing we learn about it in school. Maybe not enough, but certainly we do. But it's the kind of thing you just can't replicate. If you lived through it, you can never replicate that in another generation. The same way that people who are born, now aren't, and then when we tell them what COVID was like, they're not going to get it fully. They're never going to fully get it. And I think that's just the reality. And to some extent, I agree that that's not a bad thing because, understandable in many ways, but a lot of mistakes were made after 9/11, right? Wars we shouldn't have gone into, infringements of our privacy and our constitutional liberty, like the Patriot Act, that we should not have been so quick to give up. And so that's all understandable in the light of that trauma, but it's also irrational in some ways. And so it's good. We never forget the real risks and terror that is out there. But we don't want people to have to bear that into future generations. So I don't think we can replicate it. And I'm also not sure that we should.
And some people would argue, though, as you do start to forget, in some ways, you can, let down your guard. One of the top reasons teachers don't teach the subject is they're concerned about how students might react to the lesson, understandably. The top two sources of knowledge of 9/11 were from family and friends, then the internet and social media. So, Angela, I know you touched on this. John, what do you think? I mean, should the parents or teachers, is that their responsibility to help them understand?
I mean, as everyone has already said, this is how culture works and how we evolve. I can learn about Pearl Harbor, but it will never affect me the way it affected my grandparents who were alive and aware of the horror. I'm the child of a history teacher. I'm from downtown Manhattan. That's my neighborhood, too. I like to say those who don't learn from history are doomed to watch the History Channel. And we already have a great problem with people not knowing history in this country. Less than 2% of male college students, less than 1% of female college students take history as a major, and over a third of college kids did not know which century the American Revolution took place. So this problem is much bigger than just 9/11. But I have to agree, it is important not just to study the tragedy of the event and replay that footage over and over, but to study what happened before, what happened afterwards, and how the grief of the nation was exploited into an illegal war that killed hundreds of thousands of innocent people. I'm all for teaching 9/11, but we have to remind children that we were attacked on that day by 0 Afghans, 0 Iranians, and 0 Iraqis.
All right, and very good points there. Let's wrap up the discussion on that.
Well, nobody's gotten to the bottom of 9/11, unfortunately, and they should have. Well, nobody's gotten to the bottom of 9/11, unfortunately, and they should have. Well, nobody's gotten to the bottom of 9/11, unfortunately, and they should have. Well, nobody's gotten to the bottom of 9/11, unfortunately, and they should have. Well, nobody's gotten to the bottom of 9/11, unfortunately, and they should have.